So we've got 45 minutes together to talk about this all-important subject of Christmas stocking. Obviously that's to do with your Christmas inventory. So we've got a lot to get through, and I want to make sure that I leave you with as many ideas for making money over the next few months as possible. Who is here to buy over the next few days? Hands up. You don't need to be embarrassed. It's okay, it's a buying show. But so I just want to get a sense of that, and some of you may be here just to look with a view of perhaps buying later, and some of you perhaps are not even in that position at all. So the first thing I want you to understand about inventory management, and I want to try and make it easy. I don't have a pointer or a thingy today for some reason, so I'll have to use my hands and my fingers. The first thing to understand about inventory management is, firstly, it's not complicated. We overcomplicate it. And secondly, it doesn't start with inventory. It's not the first thing that we need to do. See, for many of you, you come to a show, you buy product, you take it back to the store, you hope over the next few months it's going to sell and that you made a good decision, and then the next show comes around and you kind of repeat that process. And in that whole process, some of your product sells and some of your product doesn't. As a rule of thumb, 20% of it sells, 1 out of 5, and 80% of it doesn't. 4 out of 5 will be sitting there, you know, celebrating its first birthday with you pretty quickly if you're not careful. So we want to try and improve the odds in your favour when it comes to the selection process and the management process. And the reason I say it doesn't start with inventory, it's also not all about inventory. It's about keeping a balance in your business, and at the end of the day, it's not really the income that matters in terms of sales, it's the outcome that matters. It's what's left. It's what you get to take home. It's what you get to retire on that's important. And in order to achieve that, it requires keeping the balance between sales, gross profit, inventory, and expenses. Now, the main one we're here to talk today about is this. But if you had an increase of sales of $200,000 last year, but you had a corresponding increase in expenses of $30,000 and your inventory went up by $200,000, are you ahead? No. Your sales are up. You can congratulate yourself that you've got a growing business, but do you have a viable business? Do you have a sustainable business? On those numbers, probably not. So you've got to make sure that you keep the relationship between costs, between sales, between gross profit, and between inventory levels within balance. Because how many of you have ever had this experience? Your accountant at the end of the year says, I've got some good news for you. You made a profit. Whew. It was all worthwhile. I've got a little bit of bad news to go with the good news. You've got some tax to pay. And I've got some worse news to add to the bad news, and that you don't appear to have the money to pay the tax. And that is quite common. Most jewellery stores are profitable. Most jewellery stores are cash poor because most of their profit and most of their cash flow is sitting on the shelf in inventory that is poorly chosen, badly managed, and not required. So we've got to make sure that we can change that formula for you. Otherwise you get caught in this pattern of binge and purge. You know, you come to a show and you spend up large, and then a few months later you have to purge it all out again and start again for the next show. It may sound familiar to you. I see some wry smiles in the audience. It's probably a pattern that's familiar to some of you, but I'm sure it's not a pattern that's comfortable with any of you. True? So there is a better way. So the first thing is to have this discussion about what is your inventory, your optimum inventory level. So let's just talk about what is a definition of optimum inventory level, because it frankly is not an exact science. It is a definition that it's sufficient inventory to give your customers the best possible choice. They need to come and see something different. They need to know that you have got, you know, a good range of diamonds if they want to buy diamonds, a good range of bridal if you want to be seriously considered to be a bridal store, you know, a good range of product for different age groups and different budgets. True? But it also for it to be optimum for you as well as optimum for your customers, it has to show you the best possible return on investment. So there always has to be a balance. A lot of you have got optimum inventory levels on behalf of your customers, but not on behalf of yourselves. And it's a costly way to run a business. And remember that what we're talking about in terms of a return on investment is this little abbreviation here called GMROI, gross margin return on investment. How many dollars of gross profit are you generating in a 12-month period for every $100 that you have invested in inventory? That's the magic number. That's what the name of the game is. That's what is the scorecard that tells you whether you're on track or off track, going forward or going backwards. Because as I say, your sales can be going up, but if your GMROI is going back, you're wondering where it's all gone. And I know where it's gone. It's on the shelf. It's in the cases. So remember that gross margin return on investment is a combination of markup and stock turn. In order to get that, you have to be able to make a margin on the product as you sell it, but you need to be able to turn it as well as make a margin. So those are the two key components of inventory management, is to make sure you are maximizing your margin, and there's a whole lot of strategies around that, quite frankly, and to maximize your stock turn. I'm going to be talking at some length about how to maximize your stock turn today, because really that's the number one contributor to your inventory turn. Okay. The most commonly asked question we get is, how much inventory should I have? It's a good question. It's a reasonable question to ask. And we can answer that question. But we can only answer that question if we know what you're planning to sell. So if you were to ask me that question, David, how much inventory should I have? I'd say, well, let's have the discussion first about how much you are planning to sell. And before we have the conversation about how much you're planning to sell, I'd like to have a conversation about how much profit you need to generate to make this a worthwhile business for you. So again, we can answer the question, but only in context of how much you are planning to sell. See, you really can't have a buying plan at a show like this until you have a sales plan, until you know what it is that you're trying to become, what you are trying to achieve in sales. Then you can't possibly have a buying plan that is meaningful, because you're relying on the binge and purge process that you have perhaps relied on to this point. If you know that you are looking to develop your bridal business, for example, from 20% of your business to 40% of your business, because that seems to be what other stores are able to do, so why shouldn't I? That would be a really good goal to have, to set yourself a meaningful sales target to increase your bridal business from this sales to this sales. And then you can say, okay, how much inventory do we need to have to sell $200,000 worth of bridal in the next 12 months? I can give you that answer. But I can't give you the answer, how much bridal should you have in an average jewellery store in the United States of America. Without context, I'd be misleading you, misguiding you, and you may be misguiding yourself. So to make sure you have a sales plan, a sales budget that reflects where you need to be, not just overall, but also category by category, price point by price point. Do you want to be a bridal store? Do you want to be a Pandora stockist? Is there a place for both? Absolutely, of course there is. But for many of you, we see that 35% of your sales, in excess of 35% of your sales, have become Pandora sales. Is that a bad thing necessarily? It is if you don't have a backup plan. It is if you don't have a future plan to say, what am I going to do with those customers when they no longer come in to buy Pandora product? Because really, whose customers are they? Pandora's. Unless you're smart, unless you've turned them into your customers, your future bridal customers, when the day comes, if the day comes, I'm not saying it's certainly we're seeing a slide, you need to say, I've got the wonderful thing about what Pandora has done. It has brought cash into your business, it's brought fresh customers into your business in numbers that you've probably never seen before. That spells opportunity. But opportunity is wasted unless you take ownership of those opportunities and turn those people into your customers, not Pandora's customers, and transition them into what the core of jewellery business is all about, which is precious jewellery, precious diamonds, precious colours, precious metals. Because you've lost a chunk of your business for the watch business and the gift business and some of those to department stores, to chain stores, to all sorts of stores, and you've lost some to the internet. But people who are serious about diamonds and other precious gemstones, they want to talk to a jeweler. They want to talk to you. So and I'm not here to preach about one style of product or another. I'm just saying to you, are you strong enough in your business in the areas that you need to be and should be strong in? That's a question that I would pose to you. Does this make sense so far? Can you all hear me? If you don't agree, that's okay. You can stop me and challenge me. It's fine. It's safe. So the next question is, and you can't have a sales budget, as I said before, until you know how much profit you need in your business. So basically, by the way, some of you are scribbling furiously. I'll send the PowerPoint to anybody who wants it. Just give me your card and I'll send it to you. So here's the key to having a planned approach. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't write some key points down today, because there's no better way of remembering stuff, frankly, than to write it down and commit it to memory. That's the far best way for you to retain and use this information. But I will give you a copy, anybody who wants it. So here's the planned approach. Is simply, as I say, it doesn't start with inventory. It's how much profit do you need and want, what sales are required to achieve it, and what inventory, what staff, what advertising, etc. do you need to achieve that. Does that approach make sense? It's kind of the upside down approach. It's what we call the gap analysis. We start with your financial requirements and then work through to inventory. Inventory is about the fourth step in the process, certainly not the first. We have got three, if you want to talk about any of this and see whether you're on the right track, no strings attached, no commitments, you're most welcome to see us at any of our booths, 738. We're also in the holiday ideas area, and we've got a smart station at the back of the room as well. So the only stupid question is the one that you don't ask, okay? So don't leave the show without having those important questions asked. So as a rule of thumb, the $1 of inventory should produce $2.50 to $3 of retail sales. So in other words, $1 million store needs between $333,000 and $400,000 worth of inventory. But it has to be the good stuff. And what we look at, one of the things that we do at the Academy is we collect a lot of data from a lot of jewellery stores from around the country, and we aggregate that data and produce what we call a key performance indicator report, a KPI report, which tells us what the average store is doing and how your store is doing relative to all of those other stores. The average it can be done by region, it can be done by volume, it can be done by a whole, we can slice and dice it any way we want. But the key point here is that the average US jewellery store is doing about $1.2 million in annual sales. That's the average store. So obviously some a lot bigger and a lot smaller than that. And the average US jewellery store is operating on in excess of $800,000 worth of inventory to generate $1.2 million worth of gross sales. That's not a good statistic, ladies and gentlemen. And it means that it's a constant struggle to get the cash out of your business, to be able to utilise that money for best effect. It means that your arteries are clogged. Your business has been ground to a halt because it's choking with aged inventory that has got no future in your business. If your customers don't want it, which if they did, they would have taken it home already. If they don't want it, then you've got to get some attitude about it and say, I don't want it either. What's the point in having that? But I say that is average, but I'm also not saying that this is best practice. This is more common practice, certainly, than best practice. If I was talking to a group of Australian jewellers, and I will be this time next week, and I do often. By the way, I'm from New Zealand. I didn't even say that, did I? But Yesterday I ran out of time, so I was sure not to run out of time today. So I'm David Brown, everybody, from New Zealand. So where? From Christchurch. Oh, wow. I have to talk to you later. Where we've had all the earthquakes, unfortunately. But I'm going to be in Australia next week talking to a group of Australian jewellers. And I'll be using a similar slide for them. It'll have two different figures on here, $3.50 and $4. Because that's the average Australian store is doing the same level of sales that you are doing here, which is about 1.2 million. The average Australian jewellery store is doing that with just over $300,000 worth of inventory compared with your $800,000 of inventory. They are also achieving a margin of closer to 55% compared with your margin here on average of 50%.
Why is that?
They're just smarter. No. Look, for a New Zealander to say that an Australian's smarter, I tell you, it does not come easily. So no, it's not. That's not the answer. I guess they tend to have been computerized for longer. They tend to have smaller population bases to sell to, so they have to be much leaner and much more selective in their staffing, much more selective in their inventory. They just seem to don't be hung up about margin, and they just don't seem to have to feel like they need to discount every damn thing that goes out the door. So there's a bunch of answers to your question, and one of them is not that they're smarter than you. No. If they can do it, it can be done, I promise you. And if they can do it, you can do it. You can do it. And we're committed and passionate to get those sort of figures happening here. And you know what? We've got clients here doing those sorts of numbers and even better than that. You know, Sally, who's with our company now, she ran an organisation in the USA doing $90 million in sales from 10 stores. And at the end of her tenure there, which was about 16 years, they had a stock turn of 2.3 compared with a stock turn of 0.7 on average in this country. They had an average retail value of over $3,000. They had a margin of 55% compared with the average of 50. They sold 80% of their product was bridal, and they started, when she started with them, their stock turn was 0.3. And that was excluding all the stuff they'd put in the safe that they'd kind of forgotten about over the years. So it was probably 0.0 something in reality. So it can be done. It's just, you've got to pay attention to it. You've got to make a decision. What we want for you is for you to demand more from your business. Because I don't think, looking at you, you can demand more from yourselves. You can't work any harder than you're working. You can't put any more into it that you've already put into it. As a general rule, would you agree? So it's not time to demand more from yourselves. It's time to demand more for yourselves and from your business. That means from your inventory. That means from your staff. That means from your vendors. That means from everybody, from your marketing. You know, everybody's got to contribute, otherwise they're stowaways. They are just there for the ride at your expense, and it's coming out of your pocket. So you've got to make a stand for that. So this is not best practice, it's common practice, but it's a good start. If we could get you to this initially, we would have made some tremendous progress with you. We also believe in a growth mentality, and we recommend a growth mentality. It would be easy for us to say, if you're a $1.2 million business now, that you only need $350,000 worth of inventory. It actually gets a little bit worse than those numbers, because a $1.2 million business typically has 20 to 25% of those sales made up of special orders, custom orders, and repairs. True? So really, you should strip all of those things out. You don't have a $1.2 million business from retail sales. You probably have a 800 or 900,000. You only need enough inventory to do 800 or 900,000, really. So, but I'm not going to get complicated about it at this stage. But we could say you have got too much inventory. You need to get rid of all of that surplus inventory. But see, that's not a growth mentality. Growth mentality says, Paul, you don't have too much inventory. You just don't have enough sales relative to the inventory that you've got. What would you rather fix? Reduce your inventory or build your sales, or both? Probably. So growth mentality says let's not slash and burn, because otherwise, if we reduce your inventory to be perfect today for a $1.2 million business, how are you going to get to 1.5? You've already run out of gas. You know, you are running so optimally and so lean, you cannot get to the next level. So we want you to get to the next level. If you're 1.5 now, we want you to be a $2 million store. If you're 2.5, we want you to be a $4 million store, because you deserve that. And we've taken stores from the 1.4 million to $6 million in 3 years. How did that happen? Did he relocate? No, he stayed in exactly the same store. He finally got the fact that he was tired, frustrated about working for nothing. And he said, I want things to change. And we said to him, what sort of business do you think you've got here? And he said, 2.5 million. We said, if you settle for 2.5 million, you don't need our help. You're aiming too low. And seriously, he went to 6 million bucks. I take zero credit for that, because he was the one who implemented everything to bring about those results. We want you to have that growth mentality. We want you to think big. We want you to develop the business that you got into business to have in the first place. But for many, it's been knocked out of you because of the economy, because of the damn customers, because of the opposition, because I'm getting tired. Last 30 years went in a blink. So here endeth the sermon. I'll get back to the PowerPoint. There are 4 options once you know how much inventory you need based on the sales that you need. Some of you may need to increase your inventory overall, or you may need to increase inventory in certain areas. If you want to become a bridal business and right now you've got 3 rings, we'd say you need to increase your inventory in those areas. It may be that your inventory, as I said before, is not the problem. It's just that your sales are not consistent with the level of inventory you've got, but you're okay with keeping your inventory the same and growing your sales by getting better product in and being better sold, more effectively sold. For many, there is a need to decrease your inventory levels. Many of you have got product sitting on the shelf that has been there for many years. I'll show you soon how much that's costing you, and it's not pretty. But it's not the fact that it's just costing you. It is dead. It's surplus. It's unnecessary. And you either and at the same time you've got credit card debt and lines of credit. So you're paying interest to people to provide money to your business to keep you propped up for product that shouldn't be there, that is also costing you just to sit there. And the 4th option is and this can be a combination, is to increase sales, as I said, relative to the inventory that you have. Does that make sense? So it'll vary from store to store. It'll vary from category to category. But you need to make a decision, because unless you make that decision, firstly, unless you establish what your optimum inventory level is, you've got nothing to manage it by. Who here has some form of inventory management reporting? Can I see a show of hands? Okay, great. And that can be very useful to help you manage your inventory, but only if it has context. Only if you know how much it should be in the first place. You can look at a report and say, I've got this amount of inventory, but how much should I have? How much do I need to get to that level? See, reports, if you keep looking at reports without knowing where you're trying to get to, it's like driving down the road looking in the rear view mirror. You're going to have an accident sometime soon. Is it important to read the data, the historical data, and learn from it? Absolutely. But only if you know 2 things: where you are now relative to where you're trying to get to. Then those reports come to life. They are incredibly valuable. And no system will do that for you. That's what you have to do for yourselves. Okay, your optimum inventory. You either need, based on the show, let's talk about a couple of things. You either need a buying plan, which is based on your sales plan, as I said before, or there is an option here, a selling plan based on your buying plan. So let's explore those 2 options in a little bit more detail. Here's an example of a sell first, buy second plan. So you've got the sales plan in place and you want to buy to support that sales plan and make sure you can have the product to be able to achieve the budgets that you have ambitiously set. So let's say you require $650,000 worth of gross profit in your business to pay all of the costs, to put money into your retirement fund, to get a decent return on your investment, and to know that you've got a solid future ahead of you. And that you are achieving, let's say, a 55% margin, which is, as I've said, is above average. That would mean that you would need sales of 1.18 million. If you need sales of 1.18 million, let's assume you need $395,000 worth of inventory based on that multiplier of 3 that I mentioned before. Again, I'm being very simplistic here because the 1.8 million or 1.18 million includes special orders, custom, and that really needs to be stripped out, but that's another exercise. If you already have, say, $450,000 worth of inventory, and you've already concluded now that you only need $395,000 worth of inventory, you've really got two choices, haven't you? You can reduce your inventory by $55,000, or you can say, I've got enough to do another $165,000 worth of sales at the same multiplier of 3. Fair enough? Now, it's not for me to say what decision you need to make, but you do need to definitely make that decision. Here it is in a graphic form, basically, just so it's a bit easier. So you've got sales budget of 1.18. You've got gross margin of whatever your gross margin is. If it's 50%, then these two figures would be equal. But because it's a 55% gross margin, it's delivering 650 grand's worth of gross profit, which is what you need. Cost of sales for the year of 530,000. At a 1.3 stock turn, you would need $395,000 worth of inventory, and you currently have 450. So that's the kind of picture I'd like you to be able to get in your business. Now, a couple of things to talk about. These two here, this one and this one, the margin and the stock turn, these things are byproducts. Sales, gross profit, cost of sales, GEMROI, they are byproducts of the depending on how effective you are with your margin and your stock turn, okay? So everything else basically just happens that these two things you make happen. The average store in the US, stock turn of about half that. That means that your average inventory that you plan to buy here, you are expecting to still own in about 15 months' time. That's what a 0.65 stock turn means. And I'm sure that is not your plan. It's just the outcome that you are achieving. Most of you, not everybody. One, is it possible, do you think, to have too high a stock turn? It actually is. Because, and that is a fairly optimum stock turn. Because if you run I've seen stock turns of 3 plus. And the figures look great on paper, but they don't have the growth mentality. They have they've shrunk everything to make the reports look good, and they've got nowhere to go from there. A friend of mine, Chuck Lean, who was the president of Stella for 16 years, he said to me, David, you can't shrink your way to greatness. And that's true. You cannot shrink your way to greatness. So that should be a target. And that should be a target. As owners and managers of jewellery stores, you want to be asking these questions. How do I get my margin to 55%? What do I need to do in order to achieve that? Because if others can do it, I should be doing it. Now, is it worth doing? Well, in $1 million business, 5 points of extra margin is worth $50,000 on your bottom line, net profit, before tax. How much would you have to increase sales by? How much would you need to increase sales by in order to generate $50,000 worth of net profit? Think about it. The average jewellery store in the US makes between 0.8 and 11% net profit on gross sales, with the average about 5%. So you'd have to increase sales by $1 million to generate another $50,000 worth of net profit. There's a lot easier ways to do it. Margin is one of them. And is 55% as good as it should be, good as it can be? No. But it is possible to have too high a margin as well. 60%, we've got plenty of stores doing that. You get much above 60%, you do start to affect stock turn. because there is a price awareness, there's a consciousness in the marketplace. If you get too heavy with margin, too kind of greedy with margin, it can affect reputation, it can affect turn. So we want to get both of those things working together. So go back and find out what your margin and your stock turns are. Set some serious goals for yourself. Ask some serious questions. How do I get myself there? And if we can certainly help you in any way, we'd be delighted to do so. So continuing with this example, what it means if you're going to maintain your inventory in the assumption that I made there, it basically means that for every $1,000 you sell at cost, you replace with $1,000 at cost. It's about as complicated as it gets. Yesterday, your customers gave you $2,000. $1,000 of it was profit, gross profit. $1,000 of it was cost of sales. If you spend $1,200 today from the $1,000 that your customers gave you yesterday, what's going to happen to your inventory and what's going to happen to your cash flow? Your inventory is going to go up by 20%, isn't it? Because you replaced it with items more expensive than the ones you sold yesterday. If that's part of your strategy, that's fine. If not, and then what happens is that you've only got $800 worth of gross profit left. That will hopefully pay the wages, pay the rent, pay the electricity and pay the advertising, but it will not pay you. So that decision there alone has just come out of your pocket, because that 10% at the end of that is yours, and it's just gone and it's sitting in stock, and your accountant says, well done, you made a profit, good for you. And you feel sick to your stomach because you don't know where it's gone. If you only replace that $1,000 that your customers gave you yesterday at cost with $800 worth of inventory over a period of time, your inventory is going to go down. If that's part of your plan, that's great. In fact, it's a very good way to reduce your inventory consistently over a period of time rather than have that purge mentality, is if you just spend whatever you decide you need in less inventory, I need 20% less inventory, if you do that on a day-by-day basis with your open to buy budget, you will get there slowly, but you will get there in a very controlled way without having to have massive discounts and create yet another problem. Another example of the reverse of that. Okay, so that was, I come to a show to buy product based on what I plan to sell back at my business in order to generate the profit I need to live and retire. That makes sense? Got that clear? So the second equation is, you come to a show and you find product that is just, you just have to have it, right? It's a new designer, it's a new vendor, it's an existing vendor with a new range, it's the next Pandora, whatever it is, I've got to have this thing in my business, and I'm going to do whatever it takes. So, and do we say you shouldn't do that? Absolutely not. But what we will say to you, it wasn't part of your plan before you arrived here, therefore it wasn't part of your budget before you arrived here, therefore let's make it part of your plan when you get back. So how much have you spent? $30,000, unbudgeted, unplanned, but I agree it's a good investment for you to make. Now what we have to do, but you're no longer a $1.18 million business, because you've bought outside of that model. You've bought $30,000 that you didn't need, presumably for the purpose of selling and creating a new market for that. So what we have to do is we have to go back now, and you bought it believing it was going to sell. Sadly, every piece of inventory you bought with the same rationale. Otherwise, what? You didn't certainly buy it thinking, well, I'll buy it because I love it, but I know it's not going to sell. You just don't do that. You say, I believe I've got a market for this. I think I can sell this. I think we can make this move in our store. True? Reality is that it hasn't worked out that way, but you will buy this believing that it's going to sell. But what we say to you is you now need to increase your sales budget from 1.18 million, and we need to add $75,000 to $90,000 to your sales budget. So you're a 1.2 something or other business now. You've certainly got enough stock to do it because you've just added to it by another $30,000. You've created a new proposition for your business. If you buy that and don't do that, you're buying $30,000 to compete against product you've already got for that $1.81 million of sales. Does that make sense? I mean, there's enough competition out there without you guys competing against yourselves already. So it's okay to have a buying plan that is based on your sales plan. It's also okay to have an unbudgeted purchase here and there, as long as you go and refine your sales plan, your sales budget when you get back. Does that make sense? Otherwise, why'd you buy it? So how does an open to buy work? An open to buy only works once you know what your optimum inventory level needs to be in the first place. And then it's simply a mechanism to manage the flow of money as it comes into your possession. As I say, your customers gave you $2,000 yesterday. $1,000 of that, let's say at Keystone, is cost of sales. What an open to buy does is take that $1,000, make sure you don't overspend, make sure you don't underspend, make sure you spend it in the places that it needs to be spent. So all it does is manage the money. If you don't have an open to buy fund, likelihood is you're either going to end up short in some areas or over in some areas, and that's when your accountant's going to say, good news, you've got some tax to pay. Open to buy will eliminate that problem for you. And make sure, what open to buy will also do is make sure that the money is sitting there, because you've taken that money and you've put it into your open to buy fund. If you went to vendors, and we believe in a strong partnership relationship with your vendors. It's not an adversarial relationship. It's not a conquest. It's a partnership. But cash is king. Would you agree? If you went to these vendors and said, I'll take this, 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 and this because it's part of my plan, and I want to pay you straight away. As soon as it hits I wouldn't suggest paying for it here at the show, but I would suggest an arrangement that as soon as it gets to my store, I'm going to deposit the funds into your account. If I pay you immediately rather than the normal 60-day terms that we have, is there a prompt payment settlement discount? Likelihood is, yes there is. In my jewellery store, we added $28,000 to our bottom line by using our open to buy fund to manage our money and get settlement discounts. Again, how much do you have to increase sales by to add $28,000 worth of net profit to your bottom line? A lot. But if you have an open to buy and you use the money effectively and negotiate those cash deals, those I'll pay you tomorrow, or I'll pay you when it right, you will see, not with everybody, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the vendors, but you'll see some good terms. There are 4 parts to this whole puzzle as well. And one of the things I hope you've at least done some preparation for is the first one. What to do before you buy. You know, part of that's the open to buy calculation. Where do I need to buy? How am I going to pay for it? So I hope that you've come with a plan, as we've talked about, based on a sales plan. But when you leave the show and you've made your decisions, whatever those decisions are, you still have a great deal of control over the outcome and the success of that purchase that you've made. Most of you are very good buyers. As I said yesterday to the group, I can tell that by your reports. You're just not quite as good at selling the stuff as you are at buying the stuff, and that's why you still end up, with clogged arteries, a few years later. So, but there is hope. If you have a strategy for what to do with that inventory when it gets back to the store. If it doesn't sell within 39 days of getting back to your store, the likelihood of it selling after that goes down dramatically, mainly because your staff get sick of showing it to customers. People say to me, David, that product you told me or suggested I buy, it hasn't sold or it hasn't moved. And they were right, it hasn't moved and it hasn't sold because jewellery can't sell or move. It just looks good, right? It needs people to sell it and move it. Salespeople need to get it out of the cabinets and put it and tell people about it. The question should be at the start of each day, how many people did we show those new items to you that we got back from the Smart Show yesterday, and what sort of feedback are we getting? If after the first week everybody says they're ugly, we don't like them, how long are you going to leave it there? Or are you just going to say, oops, another bad decision? Fix it. Do something about it. What don't they like about it? Do we need to change it? Is it something, or should we send it back now? There's no point in flogging a dead horse. You need to have strategies, clear strategies for new inventory while it's still new. It doesn't move itself. You need to have strategies for when it does sell. Hallelujah, we we got one of those 5 sold. But I think I was just lucky. I won't sell it. I certainly won't get it back in again. Whew. You know, statistically, a product's got an 80% chance of selling again if it's already sold once, quickly. 80%. And yet if you take that same money and spend it on something new that you like, it's got a 20% chance of selling. You know, are you a gambler? Those are good odds. 4 times better odds to replace something that's already proven to sell than you've got to buy something new that's never sold in your store. Now, at this time of the year, folks, you just have to get those things back in again. You can sell 20 and 30 and 40 pieces of the same item, but only if you are never out of them. Because the ones that didn't sell will still be sitting there in January. The vendor is still going to want to be paid in January. And you better hope you've made the money out of the ones that have sold. Stella did an exercise just very quickly a few years ago, $31,000 worth of product. And from October to December, automatic replenishment every night. It had to come back in again, the product itself. 14,000 of the 31 generated $260,000 worth of retail sales. 17,000 didn't sell at all. Imagine if they only sold that $14,000 worth of product once and never replaced it. Imagine that. They would have missed out on over $200,000 worth of sales. And it's nothing to do with Stella, and it's nothing to do with magic. It's just to do with the magic of replacing your fast sellers until your customers get sick of it, not your salespeople. Your salespeople say, can't we get something new that doesn't sell? You know, we've sold 15 of these already, come on. No, until your customers tell you they've had enough of it, which they will at some stage, then stop. But don't be arrogant enough to make the decision on their behalf. We've decided you don't want this piece anymore. That's crazy, seriously. What to do when it doesn't sell? How long do you wait after 39 days? Is it old after 39 days? No. Is it on its way to becoming old after 39 days? Yes, it is. It's an early warning detection measurement. It's an inbound missile. It's going to hit unless you deflect it at some stage. And you can ignore it while it's still a puppy and leave it till it grows into a dog. But it will become a dog if you don't pay due attention to it. Get it back to your vendors if that's the arrangement you have. Spiff it to your staff if that's what you have. I'm going to skip that one, only because I've verbalised it. As I said, now you've got to be smart enough to sell what you've bought and put at least as much thought, time and effort into selling it that you did into buying it. But on second thoughts, actually put more time and effort and thought into selling it that you did into buying it, because some of you didn't put much thought into buying it. Sorry. And I'm going to, I've already talked about that, so I want to go to this last slide here. And that is targeting and clearing aged inventory. Aged inventory is the bane of your business and the bane of your life and the bane of your cash flow. Experts agree that it costs you a minimum of 20% a year just to have it sitting there after 12 months. You have to insure it, you have to put a roof over its head, you have to have staff take it in and out of the safe and the windows. You have to pay tax on it. You have to clean it. And that comes at a cost of anywhere between 20 and 30% per year just by not selling. So the item that cost you $1,000 last year, this time last year, now owes you $1,200 at least. And so it will go next year, another 20% on top of that, and another 20% on top of that. But it gets worse. Because what if that $1,000 had been invested in something that actually sold and made you some profit? Even if it was a lousy profit, even if it was a 70% gross margin return on investment, you still would have generated $700 worth of profit by having that money deployed in something that was selling as opposed to leaving it sitting there in something that's not. True? It costs a $1,000 item that doesn't sell owes you twice that much after just 12 months. You've got to get ugly on your old stock. You've got to get determined to get that stuff out of there. I had a client who absolutely passionately and vehemently hated it, and she had $12,000 worth of aged inventory over 6 months old in a store that had over $700,000 worth of inventory. You know what the difference was between Eva and most people? She just absolutely hated with a passion aged inventory. And her attitude was, if my customers don't want it, I don't either. Get it out of here, whatever it takes. And she kept a very, very clean inventory. Make sure, folks, you have repriced your inventory to make sure that it reflects today's prices of gold, today's prices of diamonds. Because if you do sell it and you have to replace it, you're not going to get close to be able to replace it with the same quality of item. Now, you need to go through and say, if I was to buy this item today, even though it's been here for 3 years and I know it doesn't sell, here's the trick. If I was to buy this item today, what would I expect to pay for it given today's gold prices? And then put today's margin on top of that. It might go from $1,995 to $3,295. That's the reality. You'd be surprised how many times it sells when it's been repriced at full price, but it also gives you some wiggle room to get some spiffs happening with your staff, or to have a clearance case with your aged inventory. At least you're still going to get most of your money back to redeploy it again next time. So please, now's a perfect time of the year. Most of you can add in excess of $20,000 of profit to your business in the next 3.5 months by just making sure the price that they're on the shelf now reflects today's price, not yesterday's price. Yes, it's going to take you a few minutes. Yes, it's going to take you some labels, some tags to replace, but it's worth it. Make sure it looks clean, make sure it's reticketed, make sure it's reboxed, make sure it doesn't look old. Here's the key though, you've got to discuss it with your team. You've got to get those pieces out. Go back and select the 100 oldest pieces that you've got in your store. Pull them out, call a meeting, get them on the countertop and say, what do we need to do about these pieces? We can either sell it, we can replace it, we can remake it into something that does sell, we can scrap it. I don't want it here in a month. I do not want it here in a month. So over the next month I want to clear these 100 pieces. Let's brainstorm all the ways that we can do this. One of the first ways to do it is to tell your customers about it. I don't mean tell them that it's old. I don't suppose you'd want to buy a dog, would you, while you're in here today buying some jewellery? No, that's not what I mean. I mean, include it within the other product that you show it. See, they don't know it's old. It's only the salespeople who have been there over 6 months that know it's old. Seriously. I said yesterday, flippantly, but I kind of half mean it. If you replaced your staff every 39 days, you wouldn't have an old stock problem. You would just have a different one. But, you know, but you would. You know that, right? Because you get somebody new in the store and all of a sudden they start selling that stuff that everybody else believes can't be sold. So implement some incentives. I'll just hold that thought. Implement those incentives for your staff. I would rather see you give your staff an incentive than your customers an incentive first, because your customers get to expect it once they've got it once. If they get a 10% discount, even though it's on an aged piece of inventory, next time they come into your store, guess what? Well, last time I got 10% off. Why can't I get it on this fast seller? Sorry, it doesn't work that way. They're not going to feel good about that. So you need to stop giving it to them as much as you can and give it to your staff instead, and start to see them get enthusiastic. I'll probably answer your question separately. But do your homework as well. Where is your aged inventory in your store? Do your staff know where it is so that they can easily show it to customers? So that when somebody comes in looking for diamond rings, they say, I've got 3 here and one of them is old. My time is up and I'm getting to hurry along. So there's a lot to this, but it's not complicated. The key to summarise is make sure you know what your sales plan is first. Make sure you buy according to that plan. Make sure you manage the money as it comes into your possession using your open to buy fund. Buy scientifically and sell them scientifically. And just pay attention, folks. Whatever you pay attention to grows. And just so get inquisitive and get aggressive and work it hard. We're around over the next 3 days. If you wanted to get any clarity about this, please come by. We would be delighted to talk to you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. You've been wonderful, and enjoy the rest of the show. Take care, everybody.